Good evening. My name is David Lee, and I'm the Director of Education for the Dallas Historical Society. Founded in 1922, we collect, preserve, and exhibit the heritage of Dallas and Texas to educate and inspire present and future generations. For more information about the Dallas Historical Society and how to support our work by becoming a member, please visit our website, www.dallashistory.org. Welcome to an evening with John Neal Phillips, author of Sitting on a Keg of Dynamite, Father Bill, Texas City, and a Disaster Foretold. Artist and historian John Neal Phillips is Associate Professor of Art at Tarrant County College and the author of Running with Bonnie and Clyde, The 10 Fast Years of Ralph Fults, and editor of Blanche Barrow's memoir, My Life with Bonnie and Clyde. Please join me in welcoming him to the Dallas Historical Society.
Hi. Thanks, David, and thanks to the Historical Society for inviting me out here, and thanks to all of you for skipping dinner to come hear me talk about this pretty interesting subject here. 76 years ago, 2 ships filled with ammonium nitrate detonated in the harbor of Texas City, which is just north of Galveston. It's between Galveston and Houston, Texas City is. Dallas-Fort Worth, we're about 4 or 5 hours away from Texas City. Texas City's on the coast, or near the coast. It's on the Bay of Galveston, and it's a port, and it has been a port since 1911. In 1947, when this event took place, it was one of the busiest ports in the United States, mainly because of the industries around there and because of World War II. The city itself was a bit of a boom town by 1947, mostly because of World War II. Starting in the 1930s, though, before World War II began, the area started to become populated with oil refineries. The petrochemical industry, which began a little bit more than 100 years ago, started out by refining the oil at the site where it was pulled out of the ground. And then in the late 20s, that thinking was changed to start refining the crude oil at the point of shipment. And that's when places like Texas City started to emerge. Texas City was a sleepy little town. It had its port, but it was in great competition with Houston and Galveston. But then petrochemical companies started building refineries around there in the 1930s. And then in the 1940s, when World War II heated up, that really made Texas City come to life. So many people were moving into Texas City that the population increased 4 or 5 times from 1930 to 1945. It was so densely populated that there wasn't enough place to live. There weren't enough places to live. And school children had no place to go to school. There were only 2 schools, and so children were being skipped ahead multiple grades. I talked to more than one person from Texas City who were school kids at the time, and they graduated from high school at age 15, 16, went on to college from there because there was just no place to go to school. There was also a program initiated where some children went to school in the morning, then a whole other shift came in to go to school in the afternoon. So that's the nature of the place that Texas City became at the close of World War II. It was quite a hopping place, and the industries were driving it. If you don't mind, I'm going to turn this around this way so I can see the pictures. So I'm actually talking about what's on the screen there. I'm sure you don't want to look at me, you'd rather look at the pictures. So the industries, what we're looking at right here, this is the dock area, and then the industries are all along around the dock. This is Monsanto Chemical Company, which was formed from where an old sugar refinery used to be. And in World War II, the United States government funded the expansion of, oh my gosh. Hi, Randy. Hi, Josh. Expanded the chemical company, and it became the largest producer of styrene for the manufacture of synthetic rubber there. The city itself, up here we have the city itself, and it was independent of the refineries. There's this dike which still exists to this day. It runs for 5 miles out into Galveston Bay, and it'll figure into the story a little bit later. The docks, which we saw a photograph earlier, are located just south of the city itself. The docks and the refineries were all separate from the city. The docks and the refineries were part of just Galveston County. It was under no municipal control at all in 1945. And then the huge chemical company of Monsanto located there. And then right here are slips for ships to come in and dock. And so by the end of World War II, Texas City was the 4th busiest port in the United States. The refineries were all located adjacent to the docks, which again is what petrochemical companies started doing. Rather than refine the crude oil at the site of extraction, they started refining it at the site of shipment. So then there comes this fellow named William Francis Roach, who was a Roman Catholic priest. He's from Pennsylvania. He and his twin brother, John, who was also a priest, arrived in Texas to enter the priesthood. And they became priests in 1939. And then William took over a parish out in the Texas Hill Country and literally built churches out in the Texas Hill Country. But then he got reassigned to Texas City. His parish out in the Texas Hill Country covered 2,400 square miles. And he spent most of his waking hours traveling to different parishioners in that great space. And he really liked it. He referred to himself as the cowboy priest. He was, by all accounts, very affable, with a tremendous sense of humor, and just loved people. He was one of those type of people you would hope to meet in your life at some time. He was a very magnetic personality. When he was out in the hill country, he was known for driving around and picking up people on Sunday who couldn't get to church on their own, and he would deliver them to their church. And it didn't matter whether you're Protestant or Catholic or Jewish or Hindu. It didn't matter. He'd take you wherever you needed to go. That's the kind of person. He was very ecumenical. His full name, William Francis Roach, but he preferred Father Bill. So he was always referred to as Father Bill. And Father Bill, he's assigned to Texas City. So his parish goes from more than 2,000 square miles down to just a few blocks. And he, for the most part, he abandons the car and he walks those few blocks and visits everybody. Everybody in town knew this guy. And he got involved in everything that happened in Texas City. So he arrives here in 1945. His parish church is St. Mary of the Miraculous Medal. And his rectory was actually in an apartment across the street. The rectory would be the home where the priest lives. Usually the rectory is attached to the church itself, but in this case it was just the church, and so he lived in this apartment building across the street. He always dressed in the long traditional Latin cassock and always walked really fast. had a bit of a limp, was always cracking jokes, and he smoked incessantly. It was his one vice. People would visit him here at the 3rd Avenue Apartments, and he'd say, go get a drink out of the refrigerator, or go get something out of it. And they'd open up the refrigerator, there'd be nothing in it. There'd be a bottle of water in there. Oh yeah, I forgot to shop for groceries. And he'd go to a book. There'd be he had books all over his apartment, and he'd open up a book and he'd pull out some cash that was in the book. Parishioners would give him cash, and he'd stick them in these books. And so he'd pull out some cash, go to the store and get some ice cream. And so he pretty much lived on water and ice cream and cigarettes. So St. Mary's was located at the corner of 3rd and 8th, and right across the street was the 3rd Avenue Villa where his rectory was, where he lived. City Hall was just a couple of blocks away, and he spent a lot of time at City Hall. He wanted to know what was going on in his parish. And then there was this area called Sailor's Retreat. This was an area of prostitution and gambling and drug addiction and alcoholism. And Father Bill spent a lot of time down there, not trying to proselytize, not trying to convince anybody of anything. He would go to cafes and he'd get food from the cafes, and he'd take it into Sailor's Retreat, and he'd find some poor homeless person there, and he'd give him the food, and he'd just sit there and talk to him, listen to him. That's the kind of person he was. Now, Father Bill, as soon as he gets to Texas City and he starts to understand his parish, he realizes there's a lot of issues in Texas City, and one of the first ones is safety. It's a very dangerous place, it turns out, Texas City was, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But just a few months after he arrived, the SS Black Mountain was passing the docks of Texas City, and a turbine exploded, and the ship sank in the ship channel there and killed a few sailors, and that was Father Bill's first introduction to how dangerous it can be around that area. Then Monsanto was struck by lightning on December 4th, 1945, and caught fire, caused $500,000 worth of damage, which would be about $24 million today. And the volunteer fire department from Texas City, even though Texas City had no legal jurisdiction over the dock area, the volunteer fire department went down there to fight the fires there. That's the way it worked. But Monsanto rebuilt. Then on December 27th, just a few days after that incident, a Swedish ship exploded at the docks and killed several sailors. Some of them were never found, these sailors. These kinds of issues were making themselves quite well known to Father Bill at the time, and to others as well. Then, not long after that, in the early months of 1946, longshoremen started reporting these bags of fertilizer were arriving from the point of manufacture. They'd come from Nebraska, from this manufacturing plant in Nebraska, by rail down to Texas City, and then they'd be loaded onto ships to ship to Europe to help rebuild agriculture in Europe after World War II. This fertilizer was ammonium nitrate fertilizer, which is an excellent fertilizer. It creates a rich amount of nitrogen in the soil. But there are issues with ammonium nitrate, which you may or may not know. But the longshoremen started complaining that when they'd open up the boxcars from the rail lines, that these bags would be so hot that they couldn't even handle the bags. And a lot of the bags would be brittle and broken, and the fertilizer would be strewn all over the boxcars. So the head of the company that oversaw shipping and receiving there at the docks, he contacted the manufacturer and sent photographs and documentation of what was happening. And that subsided. In early 1946, that actually subsided. They started receiving shipments that were cool and easy to handle, and nobody thought anything about it. The problem with these these bags of ammonium nitrate were they were marked fertilizer, and there was no indication that it could be anything other than just fertilizer. That'll come into play later on. So that's in early 1946. We're almost a year and a half away from this terrible disaster that happens. A partial history of ammonium nitrate up to that point. Aetna Chemical Company in Oakdale, Pennsylvania, in 1916 had an explosion there that killed 6 people, injured 8. DuPont Chemical in Gibbstown, New Jersey in 1916 killed 14, injured 28. This particular one, the Roach brothers actually heard this explosion because they were children and lived 16 miles away from Gibbstown, New Jersey. Morgan, New Jersey, 1918, 94 killed, 250 injured from an ammonium nitrate explosion. Aetna, another Aetna Chemical Company, this one in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 1918, 100 were killed, 500 were injured. And then the biggest of them all happened in Germany, the BASF plant in Oppau, Germany in 1921. They had 450,000 tons of ammonium nitrate outdoors, just in a big mound, just a mountain of ammonium nitrate. And one thing about ammonium nitrate is if it gets wet, it becomes solid. It becomes brick hard. So it was outdoors for years, and it was just brick hard, just this rock mountain of ammonium nitrate. And what technicians at BASF were doing, they were actually using blasting caps in the ammonium nitrate to make it crumble up so they could handle it. They had been doing that for years. When, for whatever, ammonium nitrate's a weird little product. Whatever the case was, the conditions were just right on this particular day. They did what they'd always been doing for years. They put a blasting cap in there, and it detonated 450 tons of it, about 1% of the total of it. And as you can see, it killed 561 people and injured 2,000 people. The crater is right there. There used to be a building there, and that's where most of the deaths occurred. And that crater is where that bit of ammonium nitrate detonated there. So we knew about these things. Then in Nixon, New Jersey, 1924, 20 were killed and 100 were injured. So we understood that ammonium nitrate could be an explosive. In fact, it's used as an ingredient in conventional weapons, especially cannon shells and bombs and the like. These longshoremen are handling these 100-pound bags of ammonium nitrate over and over and over again. This stuff has been coming in to Texas City for years and been shipping out, and now that's increasing as the amount being shipped to Europe is increasing. Then in April 1946, this man was elected mayor, Curtis Trahan. And Curtis Trahan and Father Bill started working really close together. Father Bill was one of those characters that wanted to know everything that was going on in his parish, so he started hanging around the city hall and going to all the city hall meetings, and he started getting involved in politics because most of his parishioners worked on those docks. Many of them were longshoremen or oil workers or pipe fitters or warehouse workers. And he wanted to know what their lives were like. And so he became a close friend of this Curtis Trahan. Father Bill also became a close friend of the timekeeper for the Longshoremen Union. His name was Dick Benedict. And between Curtis Trahan and Dick Benedict, Father Bill was learning every aspect of everything going on in Texas City there. There are social issues, tremendous social issues in Texas City. Back to the map here, we've got City Hall here, of course, where Father Bill lives, his parish church, Sailor's Retreat, but all African American and Latino communities were located right up against the refineries. And the living conditions were pretty bad. These shotgun houses, multiple people living in one-room places. And until Curtis Trahan and Father Bill came along, not many people tried to do anything about it. This, among other things, became a focus of Father Bill to try and create better living conditions, because a lot of these people were his parishioners as well. There were health issues in Texas City. This isn't just unique to Texas City. At the end of World War II, there were a lot of issues all over the United States, but in particular in Texas City, these health issues. A lot of it had to do with the dike. This is the Texas City dike, which again runs for 5 miles out into Galveston Bay. There was no garbage pickup in Texas City, never had been. And people were just taking their garbage out on the dike and dumping it. And after multiple years of doing this, things were starting to come apart there on the dike. The garbage was everywhere on the dike. There was also a problem with drainage in the city. There was no system, not even ditches, to send rainwater off. And there was no sanitation whatsoever. There was no system for where human waste went to. It was all being dumped into Galveston Bay. Now this happened all over Texas. There were outbreaks of tetanus, of typhoid, of malaria, and especially polio. And also sleeping sickness. And this was, in Texas City, was exacerbated by the horrible conditions, especially on the dike, and the fact that human waste was not being treated at all. It was just being dumped into the bay. And people are swimming right there where they dump it. And of course, dead fish are starting to pile up. And this called the attention of the State Wildlife Commission. And that department came down to Texas City and told Texas City, you are dumping all of your waste into Galveston Bay and it is killing everything in Galveston Bay. You must build a waste treatment plant. So, okay, Texas City had no money. That was a big issue there. So they're faced with all of these issues. There's safety issues, there's social issues, and there's health issues. There's labor issues. Now, this was nationwide, but especially in the dock area of Galveston, Houston, and Texas City. Labor unions aren't a really big deal up here in North Texas, never have been really. But along the Gulf Coast, labor unions are a very big deal and still are to this day. Between 1945 and 1947, there were thousands and thousands of strikes. And typically when one union would go on strike, all the others would go on strike too, as in support. There were times when nobody was working at all on anything. And this was very present in Texas City, labor issues. During World War II, the industries, their profits increased 500%, but there was a limit on pay increases that was mandated by the government. But even after the end of World War II, those pay increases just were non-existent. There was no pay increases, and yet the industries were reaping these great profits, and the workers are still working at pre-World War II wages. And that's what these strikes were mostly about. And Texas City was right in the big middle of this. And Father Bill's in the middle of this too. He gets involved in labor issues right along with his parishioners there. So we get to this one point where Father Bill, who's finding out all of these things, and he's getting involved in politics, he's getting involved in labor issues, he's getting involved in the health and social issues, and the safety issues there. And at one point, after making his his usual daily tour all around Texas City to his parishioners and other people that he would speak with. At sunset, he was sitting on the steps there of his church, and two parishioners drove by, and they saw him sitting there on these steps right there. And he was just kind of pensively looking toward this, all of those gas flares. To this day in Texas City, especially at night, no matter where you are in Texas City, those gas flares are creating this ghostly light. So he's looking at this. And the two parishioners, they say, "Hey, Father Bill, what are you doing?" And the only thing he said to them was, "I feel like I'm sitting on a keg of dynamite." This was 2 weeks before the detonation of the ships in the docks at Texas City. Even before this, Father Bill had not just hinted at it, he had actually come out in his homilies in church, stating that something horrible is going to happen in Texas City, that if we don't get ourselves right, blood is going to flow in the streets of Texas City. He was predicting some horrible, catastrophic event. To his brother, his twin brother, he said at one point, "I don't particularly mind that I'm going to die young." He was having these premonitions of something that was going to be catastrophic, and he was going to be killed in whatever it was. And that which led him to this statement here, "I feel like I'm sitting on a keg of dynamite." He got involved in a proposal to annex all of the industries. Earlier I mentioned that the industries were independent. They were under no municipal jurisdiction, only the county. And they wanted to keep it that way for tax reasons. But Texas City needed money. They needed a tax base. And most everybody who lived in Texas City in one way or another worked on those docks or benefited from what came from those docks. And the industries around there were benefiting from this community of Texas City. So there was this move to annex all of those industries, all the docks, all the industries, to increase the tax base for Texas City so that they could implement things like sewage treatment plants and everything else that was needed. And Father Bill got involved in this. There were many meetings about this. Father Bill and others in Texas City called it the battle. It was like Texas City versus the industries. Of course, the industries had their view about it. They were worried that if they got annexed, that taxation was going to kill their business. At one meeting, Father Bill actually made a speech, and it was right after a representative from the industries had said that these taxes are going to kill these industries, and these industries are what keeps Texas City alive. And Father Bill had all these statistics of all of these other municipalities that had annexed industries and how both the municipality and the industry had thrived after that. So he kind of shot down that idea that if they get annexed, that taxation is going to destroy them. Father Bill wrote an op-ed piece in the Texas City Sun, the local newspaper there, and the title of it was, as you read there, Texas City Absorbs Industry, or Industry Absorbs Texas City, and he laid out all the reasons why Texas City should annex the industries there. This was April 1947, just a few days before these explosions took place. So all of these industries here were independent, but the proposal was to annex them all and increase the tax base for the city. All of these industries. This is Monsanto down here, two views of Monsanto, one of the biggest industries. And Father Bill called the place the Steel Band. It had not been too much before that Winston Churchill had given that speech in Missouri in which he referred to all of the Soviet-held areas of Europe as the Iron Curtain, and that made headlines all around the world, the Iron Curtain. And so Father Bill kind of borrowed that from Winston Churchill and referred to the industries as the steel band around there. So on April 10th, 1947, the Texas City Commissioners voted on whether or not to annex the industries. Now, there were 4 commissioners and then the mayor. The mayor didn't usually vote unless there was a tie. Well, the first vote, there was a tie. 2 commissioners were for it, 2 commissioners were against it. The mayor decided to have the vote again, and it was tied again. And rather than break the vote, he decided to make darn sure, and he had them vote again, and it was still a tie. And then he cast the vote to have the industries annexed there. So the mayor, Curtis Trahan, he actually cast the tie-breaking vote. And in one fell swoop, all those industries became part of Texas City. This was on April 10th, 1947. 6 days later, the SS Grand Camp docks there at Texas City and starts taking on ammonium nitrate fertilizer. Also at this time, remember I mentioned earlier that the longshoremen were starting to complain about ammonium nitrate fertilizer arriving hot and that had subsided. Well, it was starting to arrive hot again. The issue, part of the issue was the way it was being handled. The labeling, as I said, of the bags just said fertilizer. It didn't say it was an oxidizer, which is a whole other thing. And an oxidizer can be affected by any number of organic materials. And the bags themselves were not only paper, which is one organic material, but in order to prevent moisture from getting in the bags, they were multi-layered, multi-ply bags, and there were 6-ply bags, and between the 3rd and the 4th layer was a layer of asphalt. And any petroleum product that comes in contact with ammonium nitrate can trigger decomposition of ammonium nitrate and creates heat. What was happening, handling these 100-pound bags, many of them were getting broken, and the ammonium nitrate was spilling across the asphalt in these bags and then onto the floor of the boxcar. And depending on what had been in that boxcar before, residue of that was contaminating the grains of ammonium nitrate and causing it to start to heat up. At 350 degrees, it starts to decompose rather rapidly, and it makes it get hotter and hotter and hotter. If it reaches 2400 degrees, it starts creating pressure, 160,000 pounds per square inch. And if it's in a confined space, there's just going to be an explosion. But it's really difficult to get to those conditions. It's very difficult to get to those conditions, but the ammonium nitrate's starting to arrive again hot. And on April 16th, 1947, the longshoremen, they shape out their crews on the docks there at 8 a.m., and they open up the holds there of the SS Grand Camp, which is it's a Liberty ship is what it is, that has been refurbished to ship grain and other materials to France specifically. And the fertilizer was to help the French agriculture get back on track again after World War II. And there was a lot of farm implements in the thing, but mostly ammonium nitrate. The whole front end of the ship in hold number 2, that had been filled with ammonium nitrate, 100-pound bags filled from the bottom of the hull all the way up to the deck. And on the morning of April 16th, the longshoremen were going to finish filling hold number 4, which was toward the stern of the ship. Between hold number 4 and hold number 2 was all the fuel for the ship, which is petroleum. So keep that in mind. They opened up the hatch of hold number 4, and almost immediately 2 of the longshoremen saw smoke. And they went into the hold and started looking for the smoke. They could see smoke. It was coming up along the hull, around the bags, but they couldn't figure out where the fire was, but they could see this smoke. And then the smoke got thicker and thicker, so they went and got their foreman, and they started pulling the bags away to see if they could find the source of the fire. They brought several fire extinguishers in there, several buckets of water. They fired the fire extinguisher in the direction of the smoke and dumped water in there. All of that probably caused the smoke to heat up even more, or the source of the heat to heat up even more, especially the water probably did, because it was probably hot enough to turn that water into steam, and steam is one of those things that can aggravate ammonium nitrate and make it start to decompose even more. So soon the whole hold was filled with smoke, and it was a weird smoke. It was bright orange, and so there was an order to abandon the ship and call the fire department. So these volunteer firefighters from Texas City, keep in mind, Texas City has just taken over the dock area 6 days earlier. On the 6th day that Texas City actually owns the dock area, this fire comes out. So the volunteer fire department comes down, and then the dock area had its own fire department as well. So there were several firefighters working there. And all the workers and all the sailors on board got off the ship. Pretty soon, the ship looked like this. This actually is the ship, the SS Grand Camp. A photographer came down there and shot this picture. This is about 40 minutes before it detonated. And you can, the smoke just got more and more, and it started changing colors. It went from a bright orange to a bright yellow, then to a dark reddish brown, and then back to orange again. And nobody knew what that meant because no one understood chemical reactions here. So back at the church, Father Bill is just finishing a mass, and he's in the back of the church, taking off his vestments, and he steps to this back door for a cigarette because he's always smoking except in the church. And so he's standing there at the back door and smoking his cigarette. If you look real close, you can see the cigarette in his hand there. And he sees that orange smoke from the docks, because he's just a few blocks from the docks. And he says, "This is it." And he mashes out the cigarette, and he goes to his car. The altar boy that had serviced the mass that Father Bill had just finished, the altar boy wanted to go with him to see the fire. And Father Bill said, "No, you stay here. It's too dangerous." And so Father Bill drove off, and then the altar boy got on his bike and followed him down to the docks. So this is a view of the dock area before all this explosion took place. The SS Grand Camp was close to this location. It was actually located right about here. This is Monsanto, and there is a barge that is habitually here. It's an acid barge. It brings acid in for the tin, for the refining of tin at the tin plant there. So this acid barge is here. The Grand Camp was here. There was another Liberty ship called the Wilson B. Keene docked here, and then another slightly larger ship called the High Flyer was docked here. The High Flyer was filled with ammonium nitrate, and the Grand Camp, which was on fire, the Grand Camp is on fire, it's almost filled with ammonium nitrate. There are several thousand tons of ammonium nitrate inside this ship, and there's several thousand tons more in the ship that's docked across the way here. Father Bill parks in the Monsanto parking lot, and he gets out and he walks over to, this is a road that peels around here, and there are railroad tracks that actually ride right out onto the dock so that rail cars can be offloaded onto ships there. So he meets Dick Benedict, the longshoreman, right there at the bend of the road, and they start to talk about what's going on. Dick Benedict later says he kept trying to get Father Bill to go away. It's too dangerous because there's all kinds of activity going on. The fire trucks are coming in. They're actually backing the train out of the area because they suspect this is a dangerous fire, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. This is a photograph that was taken just moments before this ship detonated. Everyone in this picture, except for one person, was killed in the blast. Oops, let me go back here. This fella right here, he happened to put that hose down and walk through the warehouse, which is behind where this photograph was taken, when that ship went off, and he survived that. There was another one of the firefighters that survived too. Remember, these are volunteer firefighters. This one volunteer firefighter, he actually was an auto mechanic, and he had been on his way to Galveston with a radiator to get a radiator rebuilt, and saw the fire, and he helped with the fire for several minutes there up on the deck, and then asked if he could go ahead and take the radiator on to Galveston. And while he was on the road to Galveston, the ship detonated. So he survived too, just totally by accident. But before he left the deck, he described the bottoms of his boots melting to the deck surface. It was that hot, and that the deck was bowing, and that the order had been given to cover the hatches. So the hatches were covered, but those hatch covers were blown off by the accumulating heat and smoke inside the holds there. So all this is going on here. And Father Bill and Dick Benedict are standing very close to the railroad track, just about 100 yards from the stern of the ship. And this is one of the last photos taken of that ship. And so Father Bill and Dick Benedict, they're located there. There was a woman I interviewed named Audrey Carroll. She was 18 years old, and it was her first month on the job at Monsanto. She worked as a secretary in Monsanto, and she worked in this little 3-story white building. It'll come up again in some later photographs. She worked on the 3rd story. While that fire was getting more and more prominent with that strange orange and yellow smoke, she said that she and her coworkers went to the window, and they were watching these firefighters trying to deal with this there. And she suggested, she said, should we be getting out of here? And she said everybody in the office acted like she was a complete idiot. I mean, they are only 500 yards from the ship, and they have no idea. One of her coworkers, who was killed when the thing went off, co-worker said, "Oh, those firefighters will put that fire out in no time. They'll spit on it and put that fire out." Nobody knew what they were dealing with here. So then at 9:12 a.m., this ship detonates, and almost immediately kills 580 people, mostly people from town who had come down to watch the fire. It was like entertainment. There were I was told later, there were so many fires on the docks, and it was big entertainment. That's why so many kids were killed. Because all the children, I mentioned earlier that they had school in shifts. There would be a morning shift of school and then an afternoon shift of school. Many of those kids in the morning shift survived. Most of the ones from the afternoon shift were down at the docks because they weren't in school at the time, including the young altar boy that followed Father Bill down there. The only thing that was found of evidence of that altar boy were the handlebars of his bicycle. His body was never found. So this ship detonates, and it causes this. Parts of that ship were found 2 miles away. The ship just absolutely disintegrated into little tiny, tiny pieces or enormous pieces. A large portion of it that weighed 16 tons was knocked a half a mile away through the air. The anchor was found 2 miles away. That was the force of this thing. And so all these hot projectiles are flying all over the place, and they pierce all of these industries and all of the refinery tanks and catch all of them on fire. But of course, Monsanto, which is this, you can't even see it anymore. It's so engulfed in flame. It was right next to that ship. One man who was working in a warehouse there at Monsanto, he was the only survivor in the whole warehouse. He didn't remember anything. He just remembered he was operating his forklift and then woke up underneath a door and didn't know what the heck had happened. This goes on here. This is Monsanto here. This is the parking lot where Father Bill parked his car in the Monsanto parking lot. This is where Father Bill and Dick Benedict were standing. Dick Benedict doesn't remember the explosion, but he came to and didn't know where he was. Everything looked very strange. Everything was flattened, everything was black, everything was on fire. But slowly it started to come back to him what had happened. It's likely that barge I mentioned earlier, it was knocked out of the slip and passed over and landed right on that railroad track, right where he and Father Bill were standing. It's likely he was hit by that barge, but it's likely the barge protected him from much of the blast, whereas Father Bill caught most of the blast. He wasn't killed outright. He walked out of the smoke almost into town and was loaded onto a bus and taken to a hospital in Galveston where he died later. He never spoke after that and may have never known what had happened to him. This is the view from Galveston. I interviewed one woman who was working in this building, and she worked at a desk that was, she described it as this huge solid oak desk, and she said all of a sudden that desk started rumbling and moving across the floor, and she saw all the other desks doing the same thing, and then the concussion of the blast hit, and everybody ran to the window. The first thought was Texas City. It was that dangerous there at Texas City, and sure enough, this was the view they saw from Texas City there. My mother was in Houston working for a construction company, and she heard the blast 50 miles away. So all of these industries, all these refineries were caught on fire, and they burned for weeks. There were 2 airplanes flying overhead. Both of them were knocked out of the sky. This is the remnants of one of them. It killed 3 people. This is one of the fire trucks. And this was, let me back up. This was the warehouse that was next to the SS Grand Camp. And this is one of the fire trucks there. Now, Father Bill and Dick Benedict were standing right about there. This is the warehouse, and the Grand Camp had been right about there on the other side of the warehouse. There's that 3-story building that the woman who asked, should we be getting out of here now? This is where she was working. She was working very close to that window. When she came to, she actually remembered the blast. She said she was typing with her back to the ship. She was typing, all of a sudden her typewriter just flew across the room and hit the wall, and everything else went that way as well. She and a few others were survivors on that floor. They had to get off that floor. They went to the stairwell, and the stairs had been completely blown away. They went to the fire escape. This fire escape had been blown away. So they actually had to slide down pieces of concrete in the stairwell to get out. At one point, a coworker looked at her and said, "Audrey, your eye is gone." And later on, they had these wooden Venetian blinds in that office, and shards of that wood had embedded itself in one side of her face. And then on the back, her whole back was covered in glass. And this is another view of that three-story building where Audrey Carroll lived. And this is the Monsanto parking lot. There's the barge, and it rests right where Father Bill and Dick Benedict were standing when that ship detonated. Oh, by the way, that's a piece of the Grand Camp there. And this is Father Bill's car in the Monsanto parking lot there. And then from the town itself, the response was quick. People from all over the area just got in their cars and started driving toward the area to try and help. My father was one of those. He couldn't quite make it to Texas City, though, because he said the road was blocked with 55-gallon oil drums. There were just hundreds of them all over the road between Houston and Galveston. So it was that dire, the response there. This says 350 were killed. The official toll is 581 because there's a second blast. This isn't the only blast. So at 1:10 a.m., and fortunately, it was suspected this was going to happen. The second ship filled with ammonium nitrate detonated at 1:10 a.m. There's actually, you could probably go on YouTube. There's actually a film of this that's been transferred to digital, and you can probably find the film. There's also film of the Grand Camp going off. A woman happened to be on the dock with a 16 millimeter camera, and you can't really quite tell. She's aimed toward the smoke in the distance there, and all of a sudden the camera just starts tumbling. So here we have where the Grand Camp was located. Here's that barge and how it shifted onto land there. This was a warehouse, a second warehouse, and then this ship called the High Flyer, which was loaded with ammonium nitrate and sulfur. Sulfur is another thing that if it mixes with ammonium nitrate causes it to start decomposing. And so we've got a ship filled with ammonium nitrate and sulfur. And when the Grand Camp exploded, it knocked the High Flyer loose from its mooring and pushed it up against the Wilson King. And then the holes where the sulfur was open, and so those hot shards dropped into that sulfur and ignited the sulfur. So it's on fire. And so everyone suspects this ship's probably going to blow too, and so there's an attempt to move it, but it's so damaged, they only get it about 50 feet in front of the Wilson B. Keene, and all of a sudden, just like fireworks, these sparks start flying out of the ship, and the tug that's trying to tow it cuts itself loose and gets just far enough away to where it's not damaged when it detonates. And it cuts the Wilson B. Keene. Of course, this thing just disintegrates. The Wilson B. Keene gets cut in two. The stern of the Wilson B. Keene is thrown all the way against this building here, this grain elevator here, thrown through the air and lands next to this grain elevator here. And then the bow of the ship remains stuck there. It remained there until 1949, 2 years later. So the second nitrate ship explodes there. And here's the Wilson Keene, what's left of the Wilson Keene, sitting in the main slip there. This is a remnant of one of the two ships, and you see how far away it is from, the ship exploded in this area here, and this giant chunk here landed out in this pasture. You can see they're running cattle in this pasture here. And so this is the mayor, and this man is the vice president of the shipping company that handled all the shipments. He's the one that wrote the letter complaining that the ammonium nitrate was arriving hot. His name is Swede Sandberg. He was on the dock, and he survived the blast. So he and the mayor are meeting there in City Hall, in the mayor's office. Take a look at the blinds behind him and all the debris on the floor. The City Hall wasn't that far away. Everything in Texas City was damaged. But the hardest hit were the poor parts of Texas City. Most of them were right up against Monsanto and those other industries there. And all of this area had to be condemned. And a lot of the casualties in the city took place in the poor African-American Latino communities that Father Bill was trying to help. A lot of money started pouring in, relief money, just from all over, and then a principal singer for the Metropolitan Opera offered to give 3 free concerts to raise money. And then a bunch of people from Hollywood, Phil Harris and Frank Sinatra and a whole bunch of others, put on free concerts in Galveston, in Houston, in San Antonio, in Beaumont, to raise money. A lot of money was raised. So that was one good thing that came out of it. Audrey Carroll went back to work at Monsanto. They rebuilt Monsanto. Here's what's left of it after the fires stopped burning. Here's where the Grand Camp was located here. And this is where one of the warehouses used to be, the second warehouse. The High Flyer was there. If you look real close, this blob right here, that's the bow of the Wilson B. Keene still sitting there. This photo is taken about 2 years after the event. Monsanto rebuilt and kept everybody who survived the thing, kept them on payroll while there was no work. Kept them on payroll the whole time, which was kind of a neat thing. And Audrey Carroll went back to work there, and she said for the whole rest of the time she ever worked there, all she smelled was chemicals and death. Oh, I got to tell you her story of getting out of the place. After she left the building, there were fires all around here. And there's this ditch right here, normally for rainwater. But it was filled with chemicals that were on fire. And she didn't know how to get across that ditch. And she was nearly blinded from the injuries she had. And blood was all over her face. She could hardly see. And she's standing there at the ditch, she said, and with all this fire, and wondering how she's going to get across all of these burning chemicals. And she said 2 men came out of the smoke behind her. One picked her up by one arm, the other picked her up by the other arm, and they walked her across, they carried her over, they walked through the burning chemicals, and then deposited her on the other side and kept on walking. And for the rest of her life, she described them as her guardian angels, because they just appeared from nowhere and then just disappeared. So she's on the other side, and her story doesn't end. She's wandering around out here trying to find the road, and she finally finds the road into Texas City, and a car comes along, and she thinks, oh, good. And it has a big red cross on it. It's a Red Cross car, and it stops. And the woman behind the wheel looks at Audrey Carroll and says, are you okay? And she said, yeah, can you give me a ride into town? And Audrey Carroll opens up the door of the Red Cross car, and the woman behind the wheel says, no, don't get in, you'll get blood all over my car, and she drove off. Audrey Carroll did not have kind things to say about the Red Cross. Also, Mayor Trahan didn't think much of the Red Cross response either. He made international news when he described the leaders of the Red Cross as more interested in press coverage than in actual relief. Of course, Texas City rebuilt, and today it's a thriving port, still one of the busiest ports in the nation. But it seems like we may have never learned anything from all of this. Just a couple of months after the Texas City explosion, a Liberty ship docking in France with ammonium nitrate that was loaded in Baltimore exploded in the harbor of Brest. And as you can see, 29 were killed, 1,100 were injured. The same year, ammonium nitrate detonated in Maine. Didn't kill anybody, but it injured 40 people and nearly destroyed the whole town. In 1959, Roseburg, Oregon, 14 were killed, 200 were injured, ammonium nitrate. Kansas City, Missouri, 1988, 6 were killed, 110 were injured, ammonium nitrate. This is not related to ammonium nitrate, but in Pasadena, not far from Texas City, there in 1989, the Phillips 66 refinery exploded and caught fire. And as you can see, it killed 23, injured 130. And then BP, their refinery at Texas City, caught fire and exploded in 2005, killed 15 and injured 160. Of course, BP are the ones that brought us the great oil spill out in the Gulf of Mexico. And then in West Texas, just 10 years ago, 15 people are killed, 160 are injured. And that was thought to have been deliberately done. There's evidence that a fire was deliberately started with the intention of detonating that ammonium nitrate that was there. To date, no one has been charged with that. And then, of course, more recently in Beirut, 218 were killed, 7,000 were injured when a whole warehouse of ammonium nitrate detonated. So we're still dealing with chemical reactions, and even though there are regulations in place, it seems that we don't pay a lot of attention to the regulations. Relative to Texas City and that event, which to date is still the worst industrial accident in the United States, the Texas City disaster, relative to that, issues of regulation were a big problem. The U.S. Coast Guard had issued regulations on how to handle ammonium nitrate. The only problem was they didn't bother to tell anybody about these regulations. And so what happened was the entities that needed to be regulated were regulating themselves. The manufacturer, the shipper, and the agent between the two. They were regulating themselves. And the law required in 1947 that ammonium nitrate be labeled an oxidizer, and it had to have a bright yellow sticker on it. And of course, that was nowhere to be found on any of those fertilizer bags. That's because it was twice as expensive to ship a hazardous material as it was to just ship a plain old fertilizer. Purely for economic reasons, that label was kept off that bag, and 581 people died, and millions of dollars of damage was done. And a lot of people's lives were changed. And of course, there was the deliberate explosion in Oklahoma City in the 1990s. Timothy McVeigh filled a whole truck full of ammonium nitrate and mixed it with petroleum, which made it very unstable, and then detonated it in front of the Murrah building there, the federal building in Oklahoma City. That was deliberate. We're still accidentally blowing ourselves up. And whether or not we ever get the message, I have no idea. But that's in a nutshell the case to be made there for watching out how to handle ammonium nitrate and other dangerous chemicals. So that's all I've got for you today. We can all go have some food now, maybe. If you'd like, I'll meet you afterward out in the lobby. I brought some books, some copies of the book that covers this event, and I'll hang around and talk with you and sign books if you want. Anyway, thanks so much for coming out. It's been great to see all of you. And I'll be back next Tuesday. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And as John said, he will be returning for our brown bag lecture on Tuesday at noon, where he's going to share insights about another area of expertise he has with Bonnie and Clyde. So please consider joining us for that event on Tuesday. And also, if you believe in the work that we're doing, preserving and presenting history, please consider being a member. You can find more information at our website, and we'd love to visit with you out in the auditorium in just a moment. Thanks for coming out tonight.